A warm welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with David Sparks, and it's really great to have David back on Learn OmniFocus. And I've been a huge fan of his work for as long as I can remember, and he's certainly contributed a lot, not just to OmniFocus, but to the Mac and iOS community at large. So really happy to have him here today. I just wanted to say a few things about Learn OmniFocus as we get started for those of you who are brand new to this online community. And this is something I started back in June of 2014. I think it was about a day or two after OmniFocus 2 for Mac came out. And I'd been doing OmniFocus consulting for several years prior to that, and realized that I was not able to keep up with the demand. I was often sort of answering the same question over and over again. So I created some articles and videos to help share some of what I've learned, both in my own use and working with other people. And then that expanded into live sessions like the one we have today. And the essence of Learn OmniFocus is to essentially support you all in living a fulfilling and productive life, and to really make good use of OmniFocus and other technology and complementary productivity apps. So in a sense, it's not about OmniFocus. It's really about what's possible using OmniFocus. And what helps make it work, I think, is we all have something in common, no matter what sort of work we do or where in the world we live. We all use OmniFocus. So that provides a nice sort of touch point that we can all connect on. And much to my surprise, Learn OmniFocus has really become a global phenomenon. I've had people join from 77 countries at last count. And I've really enjoyed meeting people from all over the world, and a whole variety of different backgrounds and professions and things like that. And there's a really rich opportunity to share as a community through that. And one thing I wanted to have Learn OmniFocus be is really a place where people could come together and share insights and their own experiences and so forth. So that's really the theme behind Learn OmniFocus Live. And that takes a few different forms. First of all, we have theme sessions. So for instance, there was recently one all about creating structure in OmniFocus 3. And these have a certain amount of content that goes with them, but there's also the opportunity to ask questions and to share your own insights. So there'll be many more of those to come, and I'll mention a few in just a moment. And then we have workflow guests, just as we have David Sparks here today. So people who have been using OmniFocus, usually for quite a long time, who've really invested in getting the most out of this app, come and talk to us about how they're using OmniFocus and complementary apps and some of what they've learned and so forth. So there's a lot of rich learning in those as well. And if you want a nice small group setting, I do office hour sessions regularly. And these are limited to 10 participants. And unlike the other ones, these aren't recorded. So you can feel free to share maybe some details about your life and work that you wouldn't want to make public, and to get some advice. Maybe there's some aspects of your system that are stuck, or you have things that you want to share with other people that have worked really well for you. This is a great opportunity to engage in that small group. And lastly, I still do quite a lot of private consulting around OmniFocus and productivity in general. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go to learnomnifocus.com/private. So a little peek of what's coming soon. There's really a lot coming in 2019. It's going to be a really exciting year. And some of the prioritization comes from a survey that I did recently. Had just over 400 responses, so got a good sampling of what people are most wanting to see. And the two that really stood out were getting some guidance around how to structure OmniFocus, because it can be structured in so many different ways, and it I think really helps to have some guidance in terms of how to organize it. And then there was also a lot of interest in automation. So automation, I think, has pretty much become synonymous with Rose, who just joined the Learn OmniFocus team recently. And she's going to be doing a couple of live sessions, one next week and one in January, that will delve into automation. I'm sure there'll be many more to come. And she's also going to be working on some articles and videos that you'll see on Learn OmniFocus in the near future. So the next session is going to be automating OmniFocus 3 using Siri Shortcuts. And this is really going back to basics. So if you aren't even sure what a Siri shortcut is, this is a great session to attend. And if you've been kind of kicking the tires on this, but want a bit more sort of formal training and want to be able to ask questions and so forth, this is a great one to attend as well. That'll be next Wednesday, so a week from today, December 12th from 10 to 11 Pacific time. So really looking forward to that one myself. And then the end of January, January 30th, there's going to be a follow-up to that. So you'll have some time to practice your OmniFocus automation, come back with lots of questions, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into it, and Rose will be leading that session at the end of January. And last month, I led one called Creating Structure in OmniFocus 3, so a recording of that's available for Learn OmniFocus members. So this is really about setting up your system. And there'll be a follow-up in January about how do you actually navigate your day. How can OmniFocus help you to go through the day and deal with the unexpected things that show up, and make sure that you're putting a good effort into the things that are most important, not getting too distracted by the trivial things, that sort of thing. So that'll be on Wednesday, January 16th, again from 10 to 11 Pacific time. Okay, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Sparks. And I think most of you have at least heard his name. I think most of you have probably read some of his articles or seen some of his videos or listened to his podcasts. Just a brief snapshot, and I'm sure David will be elaborating on this some more. He calls Orange County, California home, so he's in the Los Angeles area, and he's an experienced lawyer. He has a site called Sparks, esq.com, if you want to learn more about his law practice. And he's also very well known for his MacSparky blog. I'm not sure how long ago it was that he started that, but I can't even remember a time before the MacSparky blog was around, and that's certainly where I get a lot of my tech and productivity advice. It's a great source of information. He's the co-host of no less than 3 podcasts, Mac Power Users, that's been around for many years now, that he's been co-hosting it with Katie Floyd for many years. And Katie Floyd's going to be handing over the co-hosting spot to Stephen Hackett very soon. So I'll definitely miss hearing her every week, but definitely very keen to hear what Stephen Hackett has to say as well. And then Automators is quite a new podcast that he co-leads with Rose Orchard, and that's one that I've certainly got a lot of benefit out of already, and really excited for the future of that podcast. And Free Agents is a podcast he originally co-hosted with Jason Snell, and now it's Mike Schmitz is the co-host. And if you do any sort of independent work, if you're a free agent or maybe even you just work from home as part of a larger company, this is a great podcast to listen to. Lots of great insights. David Sparks is also very well known for his field guides, and fairly recently launched a site dedicated to those, learn.macsparky.com. And one of those is the 3rd edition of his OmniFocus Field Guide. And I know many people in our community have watched that, and I definitely recommend checking that out. There's a lot of knowledge and wisdom that's packed into the videos in here. And just recently, he even published a free one on gift wrapping. So if you want to gift wrap like a pro, that's a great one to look at as well. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to hand it over to you, David. And as I mentioned, keep the comments and questions coming in the chat box. I'll be keeping a close eye on that.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to thank you, Tim, for inviting me. And I think this is just a wonderful community you have here of people that just want to get better at this stuff. And one of the things Tim didn't say is when I was making the big move from writing books to releasing video tutorials, and I was struggling with figuring out what platform to use, Tim was one of the people who was instrumental, sending me several emails with ideas about resources. And in fact, the site I ultimately chose to use to distribute the video was one that Tim had recommended. So thank you, Tim, for that. Anyway, so we're here to talk about OmniFocus, and I thought I'd start off just by thinking about OmniFocus in big picture. This is an amazing application to help you do a lot of things. I mean, part of me longs for the day that I don't need OmniFocus in my life. Maybe someday when I don't know. But right now I need it because I have a lot of different obligations, and the world goes so fast that if you don't have a place to keep everything written down, you're going to get yourself into trouble. And I think that's true for a lot of us. But it's also true that it's easy to turn using an app like this into a profession as opposed to the thing that actually puts bread on the table and gives you money. So I really wanted with this presentation today just to show you how I use it. And to be honest with you, I'm not a guy who spends hours a day in OmniFocus. Once I got things set up, I like to spend as little time as possible here. So I thought I'd just walk you through my setup. So what I thought I'd do with this presentation is kind of walk through my general setup. What I did is I made a copy of my database in a separate Omni sync account. Don't tell the gang there at Omni Group. I don't want them to know I'm taking advantage of their server. And then I deleted all my client stuff. So that gives me the ability to kind of run rampant through this database without sharing anything that I shouldn't share. And then after we go through my basic setup, I'm happy to answer questions about it and how I do it every day. I also would like to touch on the subject of automation. I'm very excited about it. And it's one of the reasons why I don't have to spend a lot of time in OmniFocus. And this is stuff that everybody on this call can do. I mean, I think that, with the Automators that Rose and I do and some of the other stuff I write about, I occasionally get these emails from people say, yeah, but, I'm not a nerd like you. Look, guys, I'm not a super nerd either. I got stuff to do. I'm doing this stuff for self-preservation, and it's not that hard. So I feel like anybody that has the desire to spend an hour or so figuring this stuff out can add it to their life. So I want to share some of my automation stuff too, and then we can just kind of go from there. So to start out with, I was talking about before we started recording, I'm dealing with some personal stuff right now in the family, a little bit of a family medical thing. And I'm suddenly very busy doing things that I used to not be doing and spending time in the hospitals and things like that. So my OmniFocus database is kind of a mess. And rather than pretend that it's not and show up here with this super clean database, I decided I'm just going to show you guys where things stand now and how I'm digging myself out, and maybe that'll provide some help. So starting with the inbox, I got a few items in here. Do you guys, I think that if you're in Learn OmniFocus, you don't need me to show you how to sort items in your inbox, but just to show you, I've got an inbox that I fill. My general practice with the inbox is I use it all the time. I have been recently playing with Airmail on iOS, which has got a great feature that allows you to save an email to OmniFocus very easily. I actually prefer that over the drag and drop method I did in the OmniFocus Field Guide. I'm working on an update to the OmniFocus Field Guide where I'm going to show some of these third-party apps. But capturing stuff on iOS still isn't as easy as it should be. The share sheet extension, I think, is okay, but it doesn't give you enough details. So I've come to the general conclusion as far as the inbox is concerned is I will get things in the inbox. Rarely will I process them at the moment of capture because usually I'm doing something then. I don't want to spend a bunch of time thinking about something I just added to OmniFocus. So I just dump a bunch of stuff in there, and then I do make time. I have a shutdown and a startup routine kind of in my life where I go through and do that. And this is just stuff from this morning I was going through, and there's a deliveries app has Siri Shortcuts support. I want to add that or discuss that or at least look at it. There's a new HomeKit smart plug I want to check out. And I think I'm finally going to bite the bullet and install Homebridge. And somewhere Rose Orchard is laughing right now. But I think I just need to try it. So these are three things I caught this morning. This evening, they'll stay in my inbox for the rest of the day. This evening, they will go in there. I've got a bunch of legal work to do this afternoon. So I'm sure by the end of the day, there'll probably be 7 or 8 items in this inbox that need processing. And I just do it at once at the end of the day. I'm pretty religious about doing it every day. If I don't get it done at the end of the day, I usually make a point of doing it first thing the next morning. And the reason I think it's important that you have a regular practice for processing the inbox is that I trust the inbox if I do that way. If you instead put things in the inbox and then don't do anything with them, you let it go 3 or 4 days, you're going to miss deadlines. Something's going to come in that's super important that you don't have time to deal with now. And if you can't trust yourself to process that to the extent that you can get it done within 24 hours, maybe that thing will come and go while it sits in your inbox unprocessed. And that's a real danger. So I think the takeaway for me, at least, is I have to get through the inbox. I try to make a point of doing it at the end of every day. And if I don't get it done at the end of every day, it bugs me when I go to sleep. When I wake up the next morning, it's the very first thing I do. So please think about that and how it works in your own life. Maybe it's not as important for you, but inbox is a super big deal to get processed. Next for me.
Just one quick question
Sure.
about the inbox, David. While
Sure.
we're on the subject, what sort of things end up there? And if you have like a random thought, does that end up in your OmniFocus inbox, or is it
Yeah.
more for things that have a sort of an action-oriented?
Yeah, they're not, as you can see here, these items are not processed properly. Like there was an article I saw about the deliveries app getting Siri Shortcut support. So all that is a link to that article. Now, when I process it, I'm going to make it say, check out Siri Shortcuts and deliveries and turn it into a true action item. Sometimes it's just a word. Like I'll be working on a client matter, and a good example, yesterday I was working on a client had a problem. And when I was going through it, I said, oh, you know what? They're going to have this problem again. And so I just made a note that said Smith, I'll use a name, Smith-attorney fees. And what I wanted to do is put an attorney fee clause in their general contract that they use with all their customers. So this problem going forward would be fixed before it became a problem. So I just wrote Smith-attorney fees. And then when I got to the end of the day, I processed that into their corporate matter in OmniFocus and said, contact client about adding attorney fee clause to their general contract, So, but when I've captured it, I don't do that because, it's a fleeting thought. Maybe it's just my age, or maybe I've always been a kind of flighty, but I don't retain whatever I was doing very long. So I just want to capture it very quickly. I drop it in there. Like I said, on the Mac, where I spend a lot of my day working, I use that quick capture tool that the OmniFocus has built in. On iOS, I'll just go in there. And in fact, I want to show you guys later some of the Siri Shortcuts stuff I've done where I have iOS Siri Shortcuts that capture an idea right into the correct project. So I don't even have to bother filling the project name in. But the whole idea with this is just get those captures in there really quickly and get back to work. And don't think about it anymore, but do have a disciplined method to make sure that you get through that inbox on a regular basis. Because I've had that happen in the past where, like I said, we all fall off the wagon. And like I let my inbox accumulate for 3 or 4 days. And then I look, and one of the items was something that I had, needed to do for a client 3 days ago. And now I'm 3 days behind and I look like a flake because I didn't do my job. And getting through OmniFocus inbox on a daily basis, I think, is something that everybody should at least aspire toward. The next menu is projects, and I covered this in the OmniFocus Field Guide, but I just go through and I organize this project list with subfolder domains based on areas of my life, and I do this for a couple of reasons. The first is it just allows me to create custom perspectives very easily that focus on different things. And the other thing is it really allows me to have a place to stop and look. Like at the beginning of every month, I sit down and plan the month out. And one of the things I do is I open, and I do it actually on paper. I know I'm not supposed to say that, so we can redact that from the record. But I sit down with paper and plan the month out. And I go through this view right here, and I look, okay, my relationships, and I'll look through the relationships, various projects, what are going on. I say, what can I do this month to move the ball forward on a couple of these items? And it allows me to kind of push these things higher on the list. Sometimes they'll even get flagged if it's something that's been overdue a long time, and I want to make sure I get it done. But I go through the relationships list. I go through the health and fitness, finance, creative expression. All these different things that I'm working on, and then I draw from them to kind of get my inspiration for the month of the stuff I'm going to focus on. So it helps me even outside of the application by having them organized this way. Just to show you a couple of the more complex ones. this Apple one. I should have named this one MacSparky, but I put it together years ago, and I've got so much automation built around it now that I'm stuck with the name. I guess that's something to keep in mind if you're starting from scratch. But I just kind of break it up into different areas. I got the field guide projects, sponsorship projects. For each podcast, I have a whole bunch of projects inside of those for shows that we're planning. Learn MacSparky, that's got a new one. That's a new site I'm distributing videos on. Sometimes I do screencasts for other developers, and I keep those here. And then like this Linda one, I did a course for Linda. I should probably archive that one. I'm not doing anything with them right now. But you just break it down and you make as many subfolders as you need to. On the legal end, I have a bunch of stuff here. But the main one is client stuff. And what I do is for each one client, there's a folder for them. And then underneath that folder, I have, because my practice is a corporate practice, I represent a lot of small companies. There's what I call a corporate general project, which is it's just a single action list. And then for every new thing a client gives me, that creates a separate project. So if someone says, I need you to write me a distribution contract, that'll be a separate project that I create largely through automation and gets added to the client list. And then I've got a whole bunch of other stuff related to the law practice. I've got a blog for the practice. I've got client development tasks, and I put those into separate folders as well. The advantage of having this stuff all sliced and diced like this is, like I said, it allows me to get to things very easily if I want to create custom perspectives. But I also look at it as a good way to give me a way to overview, look at what's going on in my life, and figure out the areas that need focus. As I create new projects, I just drop them in the bottom here. These are 2 new projects that I haven't processed yet. I agreed to speak in Chicago next year at the ABA Tech Show, and I just started a project on that. And then I have this I decided to do a media consumption project because I don't watch that much TV, but people tell me about stuff I should watch. And I'm starting to work with some lists and stuff, and I'm going to do something with that. That one hasn't fully been built yet, but once it's done, they'll get moved into the appropriate folders wherever they would belong. So that's how I handle projects. I try to go through and put them in the various areas of my life, and I get a lot of benefit from that.
One question: does everything go into a project, or do you have things that are some of them just tagged that are kind of in that miscellaneous bucket?
I sort of do. I have some miscellaneous projects, and they come in different places. Like in my personal business one, like I have home maintenance, which is just a project, but it's miscellaneous. I even have a miscellaneous down here. I don't know what it's gonna show when I open it up. Hopefully I don't display anything funny, but but it's just, it's just stuff that gets in there. And but I'm not a fan of the idea of, now that we have tags, let's just build a whole project. And let's build our tag. Let's replace projects with tags. I just don't think that makes sense, because you get so much benefit from having the project. And there's a lot of things you can do with tags. I'm going to talk about those in a minute, but you can't filter based on a tag in the same way that you can with projects. You can't review tags like you can projects. And I really feel like the review is one of the most important features in OmniFocus. So I'm not on the bandwagon of just getting rid of projects and replacing them with tags.
Yeah, I think they're 2 very complementary constructs. I wouldn't want to get rid of one or the other.
Then we get to tags, which is, the new sexy. And I've got a lot of tags here. I've been playing with a lot of them. I covered a bunch of this in the OmniFocus Field Guide, but when I started this as an experiment, I just went at every different angle I could find. So, and I've been having a good time with it. So I've got people here, and these are people in my personal life and people that I work with, and I put tags according to them. Communications. I've been playing with different areas of communication that I use. And my theory right now is I feel like I'm still in the experimentation phase with this tag. So I'm creating these tags, and now I'm starting to observe the ones I'm using on the back end. Maybe a year from now, some of these tag categories are going to disappear. But for now, I feel like it makes sense to be liberal with trying them out. And then, after that, you can decide what makes sense in terms of what you're keeping. So this is a pretty liberal list, gang. So, communication forums like Discourse. I do a lot of work in Discourse with people I work with. I may have a tag that said, that I need to deal something with Rose. I will put it in Discourse and I'll tag it with Rose and I'll tag it with Discourse. And then if I'm working in Discourse, I can pull up that tag and that will show up. Next is tools. And this is one I've really been liberal with. I've been trying different software tools that I work with often, and I'm finding I use some of them quite a bit. Like MindNode for capture ideas, I use quite often. ScreenFlow, I'm always running ScreenFlow videos. So sometimes I get edit notes from somebody I'm working with, or I think of something I want to add, I'll add ScreenFlow. Some of these others I have found I'm not using as much, and they'll probably go away, but I've got a big list here for now. Home has grown slowly, but there's things I do at my desk, there's things I do in the garden, and there's household tasks. That household one, I'm not really sure why I have that. Honestly, that's probably more of a project thing, but there you go. Energy level is something everybody was super excited about, for how many years now, and I'm sure how many guests Tim has had that talk about energy level as a basis of context. And, be careful what you wish for. We got it. I first tried these. I think it was Sven Fechner's list: brain dead, full focus, short dashes, routines, and hanging around. Tim may know. I got that from somebody. I think it was Sven. But I found that was too much for me. I don't want to have to think about that many ways to categorize a tag. But I have low and high energy, and not everything gets one of these tags, but there are things I do that have low energy, sort out a payment, choose the paint color for the house. I have to send a bunch of stickers to some listeners, so there's some things I have to do here that are low energy. So I'll just go ahead and tag them under that. And then when I have low energy time, I can go ahead and do that. The next group here is location. Location tags have got much better now, I feel like, with this most recent version. And it really works better because it's just one more piece of metadata you're tagging on top. You don't have to use it with everything. I'm probably one of your only guests, Tim, that has a Disneyland location, but why not, right? I live close. And I put stuff in there all the time. Christmas is coming and I had to get something for my wife. I had a gift I wanted to buy for her that was only at Disneyland. I had it in here. I had it tagged Disneyland. We were there a few days ago. And just pulled up my Disneyland tag as we were on the tram. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to buy that gift, and I did. So you can do that, and I recommend getting detailed with these. If you want to give these a try some of the location-aware stuff. Go ahead and go to the place, save a pin. You can do that with OmniFocus, and that just gives you one more way to get at your tasks. And I talked about at the beginning of the screencast here, how I feel like it's important that you try and eliminate the obstacles and make this thing where you don't spend a lot of time working on OmniFocus. It is using these tags, I think, that really can make the difference for. I have a waiting for tag. I'm sure you've heard plenty of that. Time is one I've been trying to play with morning, afternoon, and evening. This is one that's going to go away. I tried it. I put stuff on it. I have yet to find a time when I say, well, it's morning, let me see what's on my morning tag. I know my life well enough that I don't need that. I've stopped implementing it. At some point, I'm going to go through and wipe it out. But for now, and that's just me. There's some people I think that may find it works really well for them. I think if you had a job where you had to be very focused on one thing at a time, and then you couldn't do your personal stuff until the evening, that might be a way to do it. I'm sure there's a good case to be made for using time, but it just doesn't work for me. Activity is another one. This has really been turning into a catch-all for me, where there's different things I do. And this is where it starts getting really close to projects, and I know a lot of people are doing projects as a basis of their tagging system. I look at it differently, though, because these tags can go across multiple projects. Like pay bills is a good one. I could have a project called pay bills, but I also have different areas of my life that I pay bills. I pay bills as MacSparky to the vendors for all the stuff that I distribute. As a lawyer, I pay bills to the vendors that help me run the law practice. As a guy who owns a house, I pay a gas bill. So I've got all these different projects that relate to this stuff, and I've got bills that show up all across the way. This pay bills tag bridges all those together, and that's very convenient for me. Another example of that on the opposite side is collecting invoicing. And when I get invoicing from clients, that's, across all these 100 client projects, I can pull them together with a tag. So I really enjoyed being able to get some of these kind of quasi-project tags to tie different tasks together across multiple locations. And it's working for me. I even have subgroups in here. So you see under the legal stuff, I have, things relating to billing or administrative, marketing, contract work versus corporate work. This one works for me really well. A lot of times I will say, you know what, I want to do corporate work today. I don't want to deal with disputes and people that are angry at each other. So I'll hit the corporate tag. I'll get some work done, and it works out for me. I do the same thing with MacSparky. I've got this big wide group, and there's total overlap here. Like MPU is also a project. So you're like, well, why in the heck are you adding a tag for MPU? But once again, this tag may find itself outside of the MPU project on occasion. So it gives me a way to say anything that I'm doing related to Mac power users. I just want to think about Mac power users. There it is. And then, getting on to more activities. I'm constantly adding to this one. And even just little silly things, like I talked about on the Mac Power Users, how I usually send stickers to listeners that ask for them, but I have to take time. It's like it takes a morning, and I just send stickers out to a bunch of people. But I get those requests in different areas, and sometimes they end up in different projects. I just have a tag called stickers, and when I need to send stickers, I click on it, and they go out. Online is another one I've been playing with. Not using as much as I thought I would, but I still kind of want to keep this around. Like, there are times that I'm logged in at the California Secretary of State website as a lawyer and say, oh, are there any other clients that have stuff I need to do while I'm on this website? And that works really good. And I've just been making this kind of big list of them here. And the problem here is I'm not applying these often enough. And that's something I'm thinking about is, how can I get better automating online tagging, or just get my brain to add that? Because it only takes a moment to do. And then I've got some others here, follow up. And then there's a group of them here that don't just need to get moved somewhere. Once again, I've had a rough month, so I haven't got this database fully up to date. But like Automators, Microsoft Word is a software app that I do stuff in. Jazz relates to just playing and listening to jazz, because I like to play music. And Tech Show is that new project I took on. Apple TV, I put in Apple TV as a location because occasionally I'm seeing apps that I want to download to the Apple TV, or show I want to watch on the Apple TV. So I've just gave that a tag as well. Minutes is for corporate stuff I do. In addition to corporate, I do specifically minutes, and that's another thing that you can unitask on. So I've decided to give it its own tag. But this is definitely a work in progress. There's way too many here, and I understand if that looks crazy. But I'm experimenting here a bit, but I'm having fun with it.
Just a few questions specific to tags while we're on the subject. One is essentially, how do you remember that you even have a tag when you're creating a new action? I think you already answered it to some extent, that automation sometimes is just putting in the tag without you even having to think about it. But
yeah.
Are there cases where you could have added a specific tag for an app or something like that, but you forget you even have that tag? And do you have any sort of tricks to just keep track of your own tag database in a sense?
I think you use the ones that you add the tags that you access. So, and I think if you have a system with OmniFocus, what I use with OmniFocus is I certainly have things that become priorities through due dates and flags, but I spend a lot of my time fishing through this tag view for work to do. And so I see them constantly, which really helps. Through automation, I automate a lot of my project creation. I would say probably more than half of the new entries in my OmniFocus database are created automatically. And when you do that automation, it's very easy to add tags at that moment. So I do that all the time, and that gets a tag. It's free tagging. The whole thing about tagging is you got to consider how much time do I spend adding them, and how that's the investment. And then what's the return on the investment is how much time do I save later, or how convenient is it for me to be able to get a micro list of things I need to do based on that tag. So what you want to do is decrease the investment, how much time it takes to create them, and increase the return on investment, or how often you go and get them. That's why I was talking earlier about this time tag, how I'm not going to continue to use it because I never find myself going to that tag to get work done. So I'm getting no return. But the other stuff, it is worth doing. And because I see them all day, they're in my head. I don't need to have a list, but you could always go to this list to look at them. And the Omni group, they're a bunch of really talented people. So you type one letter and it usually gets you the tag that you want, unless you've got hundreds of them. So you type 2 letters, you're almost guaranteed to get the tag you want. So the investment of creating them even manually really isn't that much. That's why I feel comfortable being kind of liberal at this point with assigning them to tasks and projects, so I can just see what I end up using.
And I imagine you didn't add all of these at once. It's kind of grown over time, so you get maybe used to a smaller group of tags, and then maybe once a week you add another tag and either keep it or don't. But it seems to become kind of muscle memory. It gets under the fingers after a while.
Yeah, I mean, even like just the invoicing one is one that occurred to me in the moment, because I have client bills I send out as a law practice, and occasionally people don't pay, and I've got to go through and check up on invoices that are unpaid. And then I thought, well, when I do that, I'm putting my head in the space to deal with unpaid invoices. Why don't I deal with all of my unpaid invoices? And how do I find them? Do I go through manually through every project, every client project, to see one that has an invoice? No, I don't. All I do now is when I create the monthly project that deals with the invoice, it adds an invoice tag to the invoice. So now I can just click on the invoice in the legal tag, and it'll give me a list of the 20 that are unpaid, and I can just knock through those real quick. And that's, to me, the goal, is to simplify this stuff. My database is huge, but I never see it all, because using these organization methods, you can snipe through it. One of the big things you need to accept if you have a life with a lot of obligations is that you're never going to finish this list. It's never going to get done. There's always going to be things being added to it. But if you can find a way to find peace with the list and find a way to say, today I have 3 hours to work, how can I make good use of that time, which is what OmniFocus does for you, then you can make some progress on it and feel good when you go to bed.
And I would add in there, making sure you're never looking at the whole list at one time, because that would just become overwhelming. So that's where the granular sort of details of tags and projects and things really break it down to something relevant.
I see my whole list, I want to just go for a walk and forget about it all.
Yeah, exactly. So what would be one example where you'd put an MPU tag on something that doesn't live within the MPU folder, just to get a sense of it?
Well, let's see if I've got anything in there right now. I don't have any in here right now that are outside of the MPU. Well, actually, let me see here. Yeah, these are all current projects. So yeah, I don't have any right now, but it just, it happens.
It's there if you need it to.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them are more relevant than others. But it just depends on, what you're doing. And a good example, like I did one recently for Automators, where I have a separate project where I teach myself different, nerdy scripting things. And then occasionally some of that boils over into something I want to add to Automators, and I'll add an Automators tag to it. And that way, when I want to pull Automators up, I can see that show up. And that'll give me a kick in the pants to talk to Rose about maybe doing a show around that or further development on that subject.
Do you ever add a tag to a project or a single action list?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So like if you had had an admin single action list and you put like an admin tag on it or invoice or something, so it automatically populates with those, it automatically adds that tag. Is
Not intentionally.
okay.
Sometimes there are a few tags here that do match project names, and they do overlap. But I mean, in my head at least, the project is much different than the tag. So I try not to. I'm not trying to create extra work for myself here.
Just as a way of automatically adding tags, I guess, by
Yeah.
saying probably 90% of things in this project will have this tag. So,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
it's not as
And,
useful as it could be, because if you're adding it through quick entry or something like that, it's not going to pick up the tag. You'd actually have to go into the project and add it to the list for it to show up.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when I get to my, I guess the next item down is forecast view. I think forecast is amazing, and I really like the idea that they've included your appointments along with your key tasks. And I am not one of the folks that runs my day out of this view, but there are a lot that do. I bet there's people in the room here today that do that. I prefer kind of the hunting method of going through and looking through tags and, looking at what I'm doing right now. Like I'll block 2 hours for legal work, and then I'll look through my legal tags and pull a bunch of stuff out that once I finish the critical tasks of the day, once I get the flags done and the do items, I will just start picking off what I feel like doing that day. And that's the way I go through it. But I know a lot of people do like to go through this system, and I think that's a perfectly valid way to do it, especially with version 3.
Are you using a forecast tag currently? And if
No,
so,
I'm not. I know. Isn't that bad? That's the new sexy, right? You can add a specific tag to your forecast. And I tried that, and I found that I didn't use it. I'm pretty set in the way I use flags and project due dates now, or task due dates, to where I don't feel like I need to have a forecast based context that goes into the forecast view. I think I'm probably an outlier on that. I think a lot of big power users of OmniFocus are embracing that, but I find it's not necessary. My goal really with OmniFocus is to get rid of all flags and do items by the time I eat lunch. And on an ideal day in the afternoon, I'm working out of the tag view, or maybe I'm saying I'm going to work on that Smith v. Jones case for 3 hours and just take care of everything in that project. And, I like the idea of not feeling under the gun. And I think creating an unnecessary forecast perspective would do that for me. It just, it's just another layer of abstraction. So then I've got to go through and assign that tag to things so I can see it there and spend my time there. I'm just fine, going, I guess, free range task hunting, in the afternoon on the best days. Some days that's not true. I mean, some days I'll have so many flags that I spend the whole day digging out of flags. But, when things are working right, I have a pretty short list of flags.
Okay, cool.
Speaking of flags, I do use them. The way I look at flags is for items. Let me see here. Let me get everything going. I had some flags. I use flags for anything. Well, I guess I don't have anything flagged at this moment, but I use flags for things that do not have a deadline but are important to get done. And I pull those out quite often in a couple places. It's often a priority item when a client calls me and says, hey, I got this contract and we got to get it back tomorrow. Then that gets flagged right in the inbox as I create the task. I also, when I'm doing my weekly planning and I'm looking at the week going forward, I'll see stuff in there that has been sitting too long that I want to get on and make sure I get done this week, and I'll assign flags. The last time I was on your show here, Tim, I was a big proponent of deferred date-based task management, which was a good system for me, frankly, at the time. But then I lost faith in that over time because I felt like it was too much time managing those deferred dates, going through and checking deferred dates every day. But I actually do use a deferred date system for flagged items. So on Sunday, I may flag 20 or 30 items for the week, and I will give them deferred dates throughout the week. And those are the only items that get deferred dates attached to them.
And is the idea there that you can't actually do anything about them before Sunday, or just you don't intend to
It's
put
more
any energy into
it's more like time budgeting, saying,
them?
like on Wednesday I'm going to work on this project, and I know it's kind of a cheat because it really isn't that I have to wait till Wednesday, but it's just a way for me to manage those flag tasks, and I try to keep the list short enough that I can deal with it every day. I even have a custom perspective on that, where it's like I've got one for the 3 areas of my life: legal, MacSparky, and personal. Legal, here it is. You'll see that within the next week, the California bar just added this thing where you've got to get fingerprinted, and so I gotta deal with that. So I keep my license. Then I send out billings at the end of the next month. I deleted a bunch of my legal data for this version before we went online. MacSparky is going to have way more. You can see I've got stuff pushed out till tomorrow, and this is an example of where I am behind because of the stuff I've been dealing with in real life. Usually I don't have this many flags pushed out into the future. But this is an interesting perspective. Let me show you MacSparky flag planning. Oops. I'm always trying different, flag or custom perspectives. I feel like, why not, go crazy. But so what I'm using is project hierarchy, defer date, and sort them by project order. And then I use a custom view because I want column view for this. And it's just a nice way. And then you filter by flagged. So it has to be a flagged task, and remaining, and any duration and remaining. So it's a simple little perspective that gives you a look at the flag tasks you have today and those going into the future. And this is a great one to look at on the weekly update to see what you've got kind of scheduled up ahead. I also occasionally look at this one at the end of the day when I do my daily shutdown. I'll use this perspective to see if I have pushed a lot of tags till tomorrow. Like I can already tell you I have too many for tomorrow. I mean, this list is going to get fixed tonight before I go to bed. I'm not going to wake up with this many flags on the.
Oh, in that case, would
flag.
you remove the flag, or would you defer it out a little further into the future when people get
Yes.
to it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
so I mean, I may look at it and say, what was I smoking when I flagged that? That's not that important, and I'll unflag it. Or I may say, yeah, this needs to get done, but I'm not going to do it tomorrow. Like I said, the goal for the perfect day for me is to get all this stuff done by noon. So I really try not to give myself more flags and due dates than I can reasonably finish by noon the next day. And then, like I said, if I can spend the rest of the day working out of other lists and getting work done, that's, that is, what is it? The Eisenhower matrix. That's category B for me, the non-urgent, but important. And that's the goal. All right. Moving on. Review is empty. And I'm not faking you guys out. I go through review every day. And, maybe one thing you should do if you're watching this and you're not doing it is find a way to have a regular review. If you've got, 300 things open for review in OmniFocus, you're going to drop something. And that's even more true for me now that I'm not doing the deferred date task-based system, because I'm not looking at everything every day like I was when I was doing the deferred dates. So I really need to have an active review system. I've tried a lot of different ways. For years, I did it where I would take the iPad and go to the coffee shop and spend like an hour there once a week doing reviews. But the thing I found was that the quality of my reviews would degrade over that hour. By the end of the hour, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. How many people in here have not done that? Because I want to know how many people are liars. Everybody does that,
Yeah, it's so tempting to just keep hitting mark reviewed and sort of numb out on it. And so
Yeah, exactly.
I do exactly what you do now. I just that review tab is pretty much like an inbox for me. I want it cleared by the end of the day. So
yeah, so I do it at the end of the day, and it's part of the shutdown for me. Just like I kind of go through the inbox, I go through the review tab, and I do it every day. And I'm also very careful about the review frequency on my projects. If you're doing projects that don't need to be reviewed every 2 weeks, which is the default in OmniFocus, make it every 4 weeks or 12 weeks or 6 months or whatever makes sense. Don't be afraid to change those review dates. Then I have a project really hot for a client, and I'll make the review frequency every 2 days. So it just depends what you're doing. But if you largely, I feel like the 2 weeks, and this is one of the places where I separate from the David Allen canon of getting things done. I don't think you need to go through all your projects every week. Uh, a bunch of my projects are like corporate general for some company that I do one or two things for a year. I don't need to look at that every week. And so then you can be free to change those review frequencies. OmniFocus gives you the ability, and that way you don't get overwhelmed. And so usually at the end of the day, I have, somewhere between 2 and 5 projects to review, and it takes me 10 to 15 minutes at most to do that. And I do a really good job with those reviews because there's only 2 to 5 to do. Whereas if I had 30 to review or 100 to review, it would be, I'd review the first 10 or 15 okay, and after that it would just fall apart.
As question, how long that daily review session typically takes you?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I do a bunch of things. I usually give myself an hour for it. I go through the email at the end of the day, and I don't answer a lot of email, but I just look at it all to see if there's anything that came up during the day that was really hot. And then I deal with the emergencies and, deal with the other stuff appropriately. Maybe I'll push it off or whatever. I go through those perspective views on the flags to see what's coming up in OmniFocus. So I manage those. I go through and clear out the inbox. I do the review. The whole thing usually takes me about an hour.
Okay,
and I also
cool.
look at the calendar. I do block calendaring, so I block the next day. Once I've looked at what OmniFocus has in store for me the next day, and I've seen my email, I know, where I need to spend my time the next day. So I sign that out. Ideally, talking about the perfect day is usually I try to go from 6 to 8 a.m. just working on big projects. So at the end of the day, I know a couple things that I really want to get done the next day. I try to get those done by 8 a.m. And that way I feel like if the rest of the day falls apart, at least I made some progress.
I listened to your recent episode on morning routines on free agents too. So
Yeah, we've been talking about that.
Learn more about this. That's a great place to
I
get
know.
some more details.
I'm kind of obsessive. I know. I've already heard it all. Just, it works. What can I say?
Yeah. And do you ever set projects to review more frequently than once a week? Like
Yeah,
if it's like a
yeah, I do.
really hot project?
Yeah, I do. Usually that's on the legal side. Like if I had a client that we were selling the business and it was a daily thing, and it was a daily thing, but it wasn't a daily thing where I had tasks every day, if that makes sense. And that's when I would put a frequent review. If I have a lot of tasks on, I don't need to because it's already in front of me. But I do occasionally do that, but by far the thing I do the most is turn the review frequency up to less often than 2 weeks. Usually, to me, the default is like a month, and that's fine.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And that's going to vary depending on the type of work people do.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a checking in every so often versus lots of plates to keep spinning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you make too many, underlying this whole thing is you have to be a big boy and a big girl about how much stuff you take on, The most frequent email I get, because I talk about OmniFocus on the podcast a lot, and I did that course on, the most frequent email I get is the person who watches a course or sees something you do, and then they realize how powerful this is, and then they load it up with 10,000 tasks because you can, and just because a computer can track 10,000 tasks doesn't mean you can do it. And then they write me and they say, OmniFocus is a failure. This app is terrible. Now I've got this massive list of things. I can't do them. And I have to write them back. I actually have a text extender snippet to write back people. And it says, look, the problem isn't OmniFocus. The problem is you got to have your machete out, and you've got to be willing to kill things off, or accept that you're going to be working on that list for the rest of your life. But probably the more appropriate thing is just because you wrote it down doesn't mean you still need to do it. And I think that gets back to the review. One of my favorite things to do in review is to look at the project and say, is this even relevant anymore? That's the first question I ask when I look at a project in review. Sometimes it's not, and it feels great hitting delete instead of mark reviewed. You hit delete and then it's gone. And then you've got time for other stuff that you think is important. Can I share a little bit of the automation stuff I do?
Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe we jump over to iOS.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I think I have the best wallpaper. We can all agree, right? And then over on OmniSelect, I am going to say I'm going to templates and say, I'll do the legal one again. Say I want to make a new contract. And it's a basic contract. and the client's name is Tim, and click OK. And now it goes in OmniFocus and it creates that project for me. So going over to OmniFocus, you see over on the left, basic contract project for Tim. When I tap on that, you can see it's created this whole list of tasks that I have to do for this project with Tim. It's all laid out for me. This is a sequential project because that's the way these work. And I do this all the time for all the different things I do. And it adds the tags in, it creates the project. In this case, I would have to move it to the project because a lot of times these are for new clients and I don't have the project in existence yet. But it's a real simple bit of automation that creates a lot of tasks for you. If you do anything that's repeating, it's quite useful. Now, going over to Siri Shortcuts, you can see this is the way this Omni Select thing works. It's just a basic choose from menu. And then underneath it, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Like one is just the Siri shortcut, take me to the OmniFocus inbox. So if I tap on inbox, it goes there. Some of these use URLs because that's the only way to get to them. So for instance, for the projects view, I just add the URL and then open that URL, which goes to OmniFocus and creates that. And then for the templates, I have a whole separate set of templates that run the OmniFocus projects in them. And if you go in my Siri shortcuts down to these purple ones, these are all OmniFocus templates. And whenever I need to run something, I just put it in here and it adds it in for me. If I want to read a book, you can see here it is. Some of these are older. I haven't updated them yet since we've added tags. They say context instead of tags. The actual term now is tags, and you can add multiples of them. I haven't fully updated them all. But it's just a great way to go through it. And this isn't something I can just show you in 5 minutes. It's covered in the field guide. I'm sure Tim's got content on it. I think Rose is even going to do a course on it. But this automation stuff in OmniFocus is a real game changer if you have the time.
Are you doing mostly automation on iOS at this point, or are you still using some Apple scripts in the Mac?
It's a mix. I think most of it happens on iOS, though, honestly, because with Siri shortcuts and these project templates, it's so easy. It's just so easy. And honestly, I don't do that much work in OmniFocus on my Mac. I think that's just the way I work. I guess I like task management on my tablet. It just feels more natural to me, if that makes any more sense. So I do most of it there. And
it sounds like you're more likely to have an iOS device with you than a Mac. No matter where you are, you'll have that device at your fingertips.
Yeah. I mean, I don't own a laptop. I just do I have an iMac that I work at in my home office, but whenever I'm out, I only use iOS. So I do have that with me more often. At my desk, I have my iPad, and I've got this great little stand that it sits on. And then I just keep it right to the side of my desk all day so I can use OmniFocus automation anywhere. And that's why I like running it through that Siri shortcut.
And if you are seeing the Siri shortcuts that David just briefly demonstrated and felt maybe a little overwhelmed seeing how it's built, it's not as complicated as it might look. And Rose is definitely going to be walking you through the basics next week. So we'll go right back to basics. And if you want to use this more generally beyond just OmniFocus, definitely check out David's Siri Shortcuts guide. There's a lot of great learning there.
I really think that this the stuff they're doing with automation OmniFocus is I understand that if you've never done it before, it's going to take a little while to figure it out. But the good news is, as soon as you learn a little bit of it, you can duplicate it and reuse it. It's not like you have to reinvent the wheel every time. All right, so here we are with some of my perspectives. The list is one where I've been working on having like a daily list to go through. And if you see it over here, it's related to some projects I've got on a couple different bases. I call it the list. There's the startup, which is the morning routine, and some of this is overkill, and I haven't decided. Like, I haven't really shared this publicly because I'm not sure, how much of my neuroses everybody needs to know about. But, weigh in. The word consider is a great word for OmniFocus tasks, for repeating tasks, because today is raining. So I'm consider gardening, but I'm not going to actually garden. So, so you've got this list you go through. I've got some duplication in here. The way I set this list up is where I make the startup, shutdown, and each one of them is a separate project. And then they're each on a daily repeat routine, just the main project. So I only have to I only have to click this to set it up for tomorrow. And but anyway, so that's what gets back to this perspective about lists. I've been using it, but then the problem is I find that after a while, I just incorporate that stuff in. I don't necessarily need them to be things I check off in OmniFocus. I just do them. And so I'm not sure whether that makes sense for me or not, but I've been playing with it. The action list is a simple one. It's due or flagged and available. I mean, that's the thing I want to kill off by noon every day. And I break it up separately into personal, MacSparky, and law. So because I have time block, I say, show me the law stuff. It's the same thing as the action list, but it's focused in on the legal project folder. So I only see the stuff arising out of the legal project folder. And I say, I'm going to spend an hour working on legal stuff to knock down flags. This is the perspective I'd use to see that. Changed is a very useful one. Just show me things that are changed in the order they're changed. I mean, have you ever accidentally made a mistake and changed a task that you didn't mean to? Just open up the change perspective. It shows you the most recent ones you've changed, and you can fix that. And the same thing goes with added, where I add a task and then I realize I forgot to flag it, or I forgot to do something important. I can go back and look at the last added and do the same thing. And then daily flags is something I don't use anymore. It's something I try do soon. I think that's a standard one, and but I don't use it very often. I've got some here based on specific legal matter stuff. I showed you guys the defer date one. This is, I showed you the flag planning perspectives where it looks at defer dates. This defer date perspective goes through and doesn't qualify based on some folder. It shows me all of my tasks that have defer dates going in the future, whether they're flagged or not. Usually they're only flagged tasks that have them, but once in a while I'll take a look in there to see if there's something I'm missing or I have a defer date showing up. Low energy is, just it's a perspective based around that flag. Although I'll say that for a lot of the single use flags or tag perspectives, I haven't created custom perspectives for them. Instead, I just, like I said, go hunting through my tag list and just click on a tag and work from there. Sparky email is one that I use just for dealing with stuff related to MacSparky. Pay bills is the same thing. It looks at anything that's available that has the pay bills tag attached. And I could do that just as easily by going to the pay bill tag if I wanted. Calls and waiting for is the same thing. Looks like I've got a typo there. So I use a lot of perspectives. I'm constantly changing them and just trying out new stuff. But one of the things I found with OmniFocus version 3 is I don't create as many custom perspectives as I used to, because the application, through smart use of the sidebar, has just made it so easy to do this stuff without custom perspective that I quite often do that.
Okay, also one thing I do on iOS quite a lot too is I'll just do a spotlight search for and type the name of a tag or perspective or something like that. And, just really quickly jump to it and just kind of on a whim say, oh, do I have any phone calls to make? I can hit Command Space on my keyboard, type phone, and all of a sudden I'm looking at those calls. So yeah. Do many of your emails end up in OmniFocus,
No.
or do you tend to try to keep those in the email app itself?
Yeah, I mean, when OmniFocus first got email support, I did it a lot, and but I found that became a time suck, because then I started managing deadlines around emails when I should have just been answering the emails. So we, full disclosure, a sponsor of Mac Power Users is SaneBox, but they have a couple things they do. First is they have deferred email. So stuff that I may have created an OmniFocus task for before, quite often I'll defer. The other thing they have is this thing where it follows up on follow-ups. So if I email Rose and I put in the blind copy field 1 week at sanebox.com and Rose doesn't reply in a week, I get an email saying, hey, she never replied. So that's stuff that I used to do with OmniFocus, but now I do. It's faster and more efficient the way I do it now. Where I do add emails is if it's largely on a major thing, like if it's something related to a sponsor for the show where they need specific things, I put the email in OmniFocus. If I've got a client thing on the legal side where they give me information I need to act on, I'll create a task in OmniFocus. But I try to just do that for the critical things, whereas before I was using it more liberally.
There's one, I'm curious about this one as well. I know you use Basecamp when working with clients.
Yeah.
And how do you handle the interaction between OmniFocus and Basecamp?
Yeah, I'm still early days in Basecamp. It's something I'm trying. I think that makes sense for the type of work I do, and I'm trying to gauge how much my clients like it. I don't want to force them into something they're not interested in. But what I do there is Basecamp is really the shared task list between me and the client. And I will put a few things in there for me to do that they need to know I do them, because in Basecamp it sends them a notification when I check it off. But Basecamp is not my task list. It's almost like the reason I put the things I'm doing in Basecamp is almost for marketing, or just client information to let them know, yeah, he did that. But OmniFocus is my only real task list.
And ideas, someday, maybe items, do they end up in OmniFocus sometimes, or do you keep them somewhere else?
Yeah, they do. I have a list written down of kind of someday maybe things that I do use paper a little bit, and I do have a list of those things. I have also in the past done where I put someday maybes into OmniFocus with a deferred date out a year or 6 months that shows up once in a while. But to tell you the truth, I've never been a big user of someday maybe lists. I've got too many today things on my list to be thinking about someday maybe.
How many single action lists would you have versus like parallel sequential projects?
I think I use single action lists a lot more than most people.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, for each legal client that's a company, there's a corporate general single action list. And like a lot of my household things, there's like a gardening single action list. There's a parenting single action list, because quite often when you're a parent, there's something like, fill out and send a check to the school about something, and that doesn't need a project, but I've got a single action list for each kid that gets those kinds of things added to it. But I'm also a big fan of the sequential list, like that automation stuff. Almost all that automation stuff I do is single action list based, because that's the way it works. You have to, you can't put your shoes on until your socks are already on. So a lot of the stuff I do is that basis, and I use those for that.
Okay, terrific. Well, I think that would be a great place to wrap up. I'm sure we could talk for another hour easily, but I want to
it is
respect your
fun to
time.
talk about this stuff and be with other people that are interested in it, because it is a really powerful tool. But I really think that if there's one thing I'd like to depart to people thinking about this is you got to find your piece with it, find the way it works. You don't necessarily have to use every feature. Find the ones that work for you, and just try to spend as little time as you can managing this stuff, and spend your time checking those boxes off, and it'll feel really good.
I remember Jason Snell talking about apps like this as the scaffolding. And if you're building a building, you don't want to be spending all your time focused on the scaffolding. You'll never get around to building the building, but you still want the scaffolding to be secure. And I might be embellishing on his analogy a little bit, but I thought that that really hit home with me as well.
It's a great point. And I think when you find yourself with way too many priorities in OmniFocus, then you need to stop and look at it and make some decisions. I do the same thing. Like I'm very careful about using due dates, but I do find myself getting what I call flag bloat. And occasionally I'll have way too many flags, and I stop and look at them. And a lot of times I'll realize I flagged a bunch of stuff that didn't need to get flagged. And if you can feel comfortable working in a system, you're going to actually get more work done.
And you make a very compelling case for doing a review at the end of the day when you're feeling a little more tired versus at the beginning of the day when you're full of energy. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that too.
Yeah, I do my planning for the next day at the end of the day. I find and occasionally you have it happen where you don't get to do it at the end of the day. Something came up with your kids or whatever. For some reason you didn't get your plan done. When I plan in the morning, I am like Mr. Optimism. I think I'm going to conquer the world every morning. And so I give myself way more than I'm ever going to do. And then I feel cruddy at the end of the day because I didn't, I finished 25% of what I intended. Whereas at the end of the day, the world beats me down, and I'm more realistic about what I can actually get done the next day. And by planning out your tasks for the next day, at the end of the day, I find that I'm actually feel pretty good the next day because I'm able to get the work done and maybe even take some time for myself.
Thank you so much, David, and thanks to everyone who joined the live session today as well, and for all the great questions and sharing. If you haven't already, definitely check out David's field guides, not just the OmniFocus one, but there's a lot of really great ones, help you deal with email and Siri Shortcuts and gift wrapping, as I mentioned.
Wrap those presents.
And I think listening to all three of the podcasts that he co-hosts is definitely time well spent. There's a lot of research that goes into these, a lot of knowledge that comes out of them. So highly recommend those as well.
Thanks.
Okay. And I hope to see you next week along with Rose Orchard as we delve into the exciting world of automation. And thanks again for watching or for being here live today. Take care.